Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining my live stream this evening. Tonight, I am joined by Mark Windows, and we're going to discuss about smart cities. Would you like to introduce yourself, Mark, and give a bit of a description about smart cities and stuff?
Well, yeah, I'm Mark Windows. I run a website called windowsontheworld.net. I've been looking into this agenda, which is Agenda 21. Well, it was Agenda 21 in the 90s. It became Agenda 2030. And you may have heard the term sustainable development. Well, that's where smart cities actually come from. Sustainable development was brought in shortly after the Rio Conference of 92, but it was in documents before that. So the Rio Conference of 1992 was basically where we got this new system coming in, and it came in on the back of a document called Our Common Future, which was released in 1987. And from 1987 onwards, the goals of sustainable development were increased. And basically what happened is, through climate change agreements all over the world, we are now in this UN global governance system. And what people say about sustainable development is they say it's non-binding. That's absolutely untrue, because the Kyoto Protocol was signed, and then, of course, Britain signed up for the Climate Change Act in 2008. And with the Paris Agreement, etc., there is more and more stuff coming. And now sustainable development is at the heart of all policy making in your local council. So when people say it's a conspiracy theory, no, sustainable development is a global action plan which is based on environmentalism. However, it's not an environmental project. So the smart cities came out of that. It's a new system of surveillance which is technocratic, but underpinning that is a system called communitarianism. And communitarianism was actually coined by somebody called Amitai Etzioni. Actually, it was rediscovered in 1848. A fellow called John Goodwin Barmby, who was a member of the Communist Party in England, actually set up the Communitarian Association. And basically, it was then presented as a new form of communism. So if we look at this, basically we have to go back to the old style of communism, which they replaced with a new style of communism. So the smart cities are a result of that, and it's a new form of technocratic surveillance, and they get everyone to agree with it through a system called communitarianism. So for instance, you may have seen how your local council has changed its approach in the last, say, 10 years. I think in Northern Ireland, you've got a thing called Northern Ireland Communities. A lot of people were talking about that, and basically brought in the social credit system into housing, and everything being in one system. And that's a kind of tryout for the smart cities. So basically, it means that the Internet of Things, and we have this constant surveillance, which is all about social credit scores. And that underpins what the smart city is. So to understand what a smart city is, it's already pretty much in place, because the smart element is the technology. The smart element is the technology that implements it. And that is in place. What people are starting to notice now is the road closures, which have been going on for about 10 years, by the way. But now they've announced that Oxford in the UK is going to be put into zones. And those zones were all in the documents I've been talking about. They're called human settlement zones. And the idea is that they want to ban private transport. How do you do that? You can't just ban it. People will not accept that. So you have to get them to accept it. And that's what's been happening for the past 10 to 12 years. Of course, we are absolutely brainwashed into this system as though it's environmental and you're saving the planet. Well, that's what they decided to do. The World Bank decided that the world can think they're saving the planet, and they can control it. Quite simple, nothing to it. But the smart cities are already in. The infrastructure's there. Glasgow is a smart city, for instance. That was the first smart city in the UK, yeah.
Interesting. And about communism, I mean, communism always had one goal, which was world domination and destruction of all
Yes.
freedoms. And and the New World Order is basically like a one world government, and that's always been their manifesto,
Yeah.
is to control people within their towns. So the idea of smart cities, I mean, they're already with us, as you said before we started the stream, but it's all coming to light now. They're beginning to really push it now, especially in Ireland. Here, there's talks of Dublin becoming a smart city, and as you know, they're also going to do like smart towns, like smart villages. And my town has been talked about to becoming a smart town. So I've that to look forward to now, and within this decade, they're going to do it.
Yeah, well, the idea is, you see, that there's a template. The way this works is with a template, and once you see that template, you can't unsee it. The main problem is that people still think that central government is running it. Central government is administering it. Central government is administering it on behalf of a global governance system. So therefore, what we have is an unstructured system in the eyes of the public. The public can't see it, so they don't know it's there, but it's in all the documents that go into your local council. So it's called global to local. Everything that the globalists are doing is implemented locally. And once you see that and you see what your local council is doing, you'll start to see how it works. And the way it's implemented is with infiltration of all communities. So when you see the word community, it's not you, it's them. That's the trick. So it's a new system. It is communism, but it's called communitarianism. And it works in a slightly different way. What they do is they co-opt the public through the environmental movement to think that them giving up their cars, giving up their freedoms, and basically complying is good for the planet. And that's the trick. It's not an environmental movement. And Ottmar Edenhofer, who was in charge of the environmental impact financial stuff, which is where it all is, because it's social impact bonds and the rest of it. Ottmar Edenhofer is their expert on climate change policy, or was in 2010. He actually went onto the radio and said, we have to remove the idea that this is an environmental project. This has absolutely very little now to do with the environment. The environment project is not what it's about. And he said that, I'm paraphrasing, but you can find the actual quote. He said this has almost nothing to do with the environment anymore. And he's in charge, or was in charge, of climate change policy. So that tells you something. The policies that are being implemented are nothing to do with saving the planet. They're to do with bringing in this system. And once you understand that, you'll start to see the language everywhere. When you see the word sustainable, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about your perceived acquiescence to this new system. Yeah.
Exactly, and I'm so sick of the word sustainable now. Sustainable, because it's actually it's everywhere. Like it's on TV, as you said, the radio, posters, even posters in schools and stuff. And so how can this be resisted? Like how can people, like, say now the smart cities come into every single city on Earth? How can people resist it when it comes to that stage? Like, let's see where
Right.
that
That's good
line.
that you've got into that straight away, because I've been talking about the solutions to this for 12 years at least, since the first. I lived in a, just to give you a bit of backstory, because it's quite important. I lived in a borough of northeast London called Walthamstow, which was the first so-called mini Holland in the UK, which meant that they closed off all the roads, as they've been doing ever since, and they restricted access to many places. So they made it more and more difficult for cars to be there. With this influx of policy came an influx of people, and those people are not from your area. They basically they turn up and they front these NGOs, these non-government organizations. They're trained in the public and private sector. And at the beginning of all this, they were trained by organizations such as Unlimited, Locality, Intentionality. Unlimited are still going. What they do is they train these people into sustainable development, into the environmental issues, and then they've gone through university and they give them highly paid jobs to basically administer your affairs. And that is incredibly important. So first of all, in order to be able to understand this, you have to realize that this is being done with your consent, but it's not being done with any democratic process. Everything that they do is basically a lie. I'll give you an example. When they say 65 or 75% agree of people to these new think these new impositions, it's not true. They do some kind of consultation, often online, but they might get only 700 or 800 people. But the trick is they don't tell you who those people are or where they live. They give you no idea of who those people are. And what we've found out in many cases is there is no real consultation. For instance, I lived in Walthamstow, northeast London. They implemented this, closing all the roads off, and it was meant to be a pilot scheme. There was people manning these barriers. They caused absolute mayhem and chaos, and they set the cyclists against the motorists. That's another thing they do. They set up cycling lobby groups in your area, and they will be controlling it all on Facebook, places like that, on social media. So they've already got the control before they start these so-called consultations. When I asked the Transport for London representative, and they were funding it through the Cabinet Office on this first thing called Mini Holland, the representative said to me, "Oh, I've heard that 65% of people are already in favour." I said, "Well, that's interesting, because there's been no consultation yet." That's how they do it. With complete audacity, they steamroller over any public opinion. All voices are silenced. So what you have to do is you have to do your own surveys locally. If they're imposing this stuff, get your own surveys done. Go door to door, get people's emails, and then you take that to the council and you ask them for their survey. And they are duty bound by law to give you that information. Then you can find out what a scam it is. Then you send that to the Home Office, and they should put a stop on it. And that is legally in their documentation. We've got a video at windowsontheworld.net, and it's called How to Oppose LTNs, that's low traffic neighborhoods, LTNs, and local and councils. How to oppose LTNs and councils. Look at that video. It's on Odyssey, but it's in that article. That article gives you the whole backstory of how this is imposed. Once you know that, you know it. It's very, very simple. And once people locally understand this, and they understand that their voices are being absolutely disregarded, then there will be sufficient indignation to take these people on. And by that, I don't mean going into the storming the council offices, because that's what they want you to do. They are now controlling that. In other words, what they want is some kind of dissent. Then they're going to call you far right, your conspiracy theorists, your anti-vaxxers, whatever. You don't let them do that. You go within their system and you point out that they are not applying the law correctly, which they're not. And these people are incredibly audacious. What you will find is that if you are a lone person, they will start to target you. So you need a network of people in your area who are connected, but don't let them know that you're a group. I have a mission statement. I think it's linked to that article. Look at this, several articles linked to that. It's called How to Oppose LTNs and Councils. Take a look at a thing called empowering your community, right? Using their words, of course, empower your community. So at the end of that, there is a mission statement. And basically, it takes you out of anything that they try and throw at you. We are an unaffiliated group of local residents concerned about the lack of transparency in local democracy. It's words to that effect. I can find it if you want me to. I'll look it up for you. We can read it out on air. But basically, it's in that article.
Yes,
and
we can read it out on air if you don't mind.
Find it for you. Yes, I will. I'll find it for you now.
And about the consultations, I mean, they're all rigged as well. So
yes,
they are.
That's it. Absolutely correct. Absolutely, yes.
Like, they're all able to rig elections, so they're all able to rig opinion polls.
Yes. Yes. But what you have to do is point out where they're legally wrong, because it's incredibly difficult to disprove something like that so that the average punter, the average person, believes that they are being consulted. And they will argue against you because they don't want to believe they're not being consulted, right? I can put this into your chat if you want.
Yes, put it into the public one. There should be an option. It should say type a message.
Oh, it doesn't.
Send it through the private chat, and I can put it into the public chat.
Great stuff. Okay, there you go. That's that one. And I will read out the mission statement because it's in some of these articles. Have a look at that article because there's a lot of information in there, including the video, How to Oppose Low Traffic Neighborhoods, bullet points. So that, and it's a couple of shows on it as well. Listen to the shows because you'll get the hang of it. I've been doing this for a long time. So it might seem a bit confusing to people because it's tripping off my tongue. But everything I'm telling you is how this works. It's absolutely how it works. Okay. So let me just check something. Okay, so we've got that one. Wait a minute, there's one more we need. Okay.
And about making your own surveys in Ireland, we have an excellent newspaper called the Irish Light, and there's also one for the UK.
Right.
This is this monthly edition, and at the back of it has this. And there's lots of good stuff in it. I hand this paper out in my local town. I reach a lot of good people, so you can also find it. You can also get this paper in England as well.
Yeah, no, yeah. But basically, the problem is, and this is the main problem, everything is infiltrated. And I don't want to sound paranoid here, but because of the way this system works, the opposition is led. I put an article out, and that's where I'm trying to find this mission statement for you. It's called Agents of Revolution. What they are trying to do is foment a kind of fake revolution. And there's a saying that I use quite a lot. The globalists need the anti-globalists to implement their policies. So in other words, when you collectivize and get into a group and that group has a name, say like Stand in the Park, all these are organized. They're organized to make sure you go nowhere. And they've been very successful so far. Because at the beginning of COVID, there was some very interesting stuff happening. I stayed away from it with all these talks and this stuff in Trafalgar Square a couple of years ago, because nobody up there, apart from one or two people who were never heard from again, were given a voice. Nobody who had anything to say was given a voice. You can listen to people ranting and raving all day long. It's not going to make any difference because they've already infiltrated all of the opposition. This is a much bigger infiltration than ever happened in communist times. And I know that because I've been following it since I saw what happened in Occupy St. Paul's, Occupy London Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
I made 2 films about that. And in fact, there is an article at windowsontheworld.net called COVID Protest Social Engineers. And I can tell you now that anybody promoted in the so-called opposition is meant to be there. And I know that with some certainty because my voice has been silenced for about 14 years. I've been talking about this that long. You can go back to 2013, 2012, and you'll find I'm saying exactly the same stuff as I'm saying now. That's not all that's on the website, by the way, but it's just to give you an idea. So basically, if we look at this...
And about the false opposition, I mean, it is good to expose them, but I wouldn't read too much into it because you're also helping the globalists by dividing the opposition.
No, hang on a minute. I don't go, and I'll tell you why. Because all of the opposition is infiltrated. If you're going to do this, it won't work if you collectivize and get into groups. I'm telling you that now. It will not work. And it's not divisive, it's constructive. That's incredibly important because if you go out there on the street with a load of banners, that's what they want you to do. If you attack this thing legally, that's not what they want you to do. So everyone ranting and raving and talking about common law and all this BS, it's been around ages. And now it's a steering mechanism to take you nowhere. And that's exactly what it'll do. So here we go. The mission statement. I've got it now anyway. I can put that into chat if you want.
Yeah. What I was referring to, you get all these like people creating like accounts on Facebook under fake names and they go around calling literally everyone a shill.
Yeah, of course. I put it into the private chat, of course, because what's happened is there is no truth movement anymore. There isn't one. When I started doing this was about 2007. There was a website in Ireland called Tia Nasor. Sorry if my Gaelic's no good. I can't say it. It means land of the free, right? Land of the free.
Can I put this into the public chat?
Please do. Please do. Yeah. Yeah. So if everyone copies and pastes that, it'll give you an idea. But don't use a template because when it's a template, they'll start to dismiss it. But if you apply those things, it should work. Yeah. Yes, the so-called truth movement now is basically a bunch of people selling T-shirts and trying to grift for hits on YouTube or whatever platform they're on. And that's not why I started doing it, which is why I've been marginalized by none of those people in the UK will have me on their shows. None of them, which is quite interesting because what they do is they'll cut and paste stuff off my website, but they will never acknowledge I'm even there. So that's quite interesting because when I started doing this, we were actually having success in the courts. I won several court cases against councils. I was given information which was so shocking that it would absolutely destabilize people because the whole of the court system was taken over with this communitarian system. And basically, these people who are implementing this are at different levels. They can actually be supported by the police and the courts. It's not just normal corruption, it's a new system. Because in the EU, they have a thing called communautaire law, acquis communautaire. And basically it means that all rights come with responsibilities. That means that the old idea, you see, you can't have collective rights. There's no such thing as collective rights because there are only individual rights. Those individuals form part of a community. But what they do now is they say, we're the community. They don't tell you that, but that's what they're saying to you. We're the community. There is no community. The community is top down, not bottom up. When you see the word grassroots, it means the opposite. It means they've infiltrated it and taken it over. And if people think I'm exaggerating, I've done all the research on this. I've got all the proof, and I've been looking at it for ages. If you start talking about the stuff we're talking about now, you will not get asked onto these shows in the UK because they're all bought into this thing going, you're divisive and all the rest of it, right? They want to get you back into collectivism. So the so-called truth movement was taken over. So basically, you've got people on what they appear to be the right, and then you've got all these collectivist people. So it doesn't matter whether it's Extinction Rebellion, because that's a state-backed intelligence operation. And I've got all the evidence on that as well, because Extinction Rebellion came out of a thing called Climate Camp Action, which was linked to a thing called Green and Black Cross, where people who get arrested get a lawyer, and they do it through Green and Black Cross. The Green and Black Cross is referring to communism anyway, okay? Now, what happened was Extinction Rebellion came out of Climate Camp Action. Climate Camp Action was a group of people in the undercover police and MI5. And I did a film about it about 12 years ago. And they use the same template now. So basically, Extinction Rebellion came out, they set up a company called Compassionate Revolution. There was a man there called George Barder who was instrumental in setting up a thing called Democracy Village opposite the Houses of Parliament. Democracy Village was an undercover police, an MI5 operation to get Brian Hoare, the Iraq peace protester, off Parliament Square. So they set up a thing called Democracy Village. A load of fake activists came in, paid activists, and Extinction Rebellion came out of that. For instance, Extinction Rebellion wanted people to ask for citizens' assemblies. Citizens' assemblies were brought in with a thing called sortition.org. And there was another company. If you go to my stuff on Extinction Rebellion, you'll find it all. It's quite a long time ago now. But basically, this was a George Soros-funded operation to get you to agree to climate lockdowns. And it's called Citizens' Assemblies. The first one was in Oxford, and they had a climate modeler called Miles Allen, who was rebuked by a court in America for giving false information or misrepresenting the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere to the jury. In this, it was a case brought by the oil companies, and basically the so-called activists lost. And of course, when they lose the footage because they tried to film it, right? So this is giving you an idea of what happened. So that's Extinction Rebellion on one side. Then on the other side, you've got Stand in the Park, which is infiltrated by loads of New Agers and loads of people into common law. We're not talking about real common law. We're talking about fake common law. So basically, all of this stuff is manufactured to make sure you go nowhere.
Sorry, is that the common law where you go like, I am a sovereign person?
Yes, yeah, yes.
Yes, you won't get anywhere with you won't get anywhere in the courts in Ireland with that.
No, you won't get
Because
anywhere anywhere with it.
there's lots of common law groups in Ireland, and they say like, oh, you can go into court and say I am a sovereign being.
Yeah. Well, I tried
And I
that
have a
years
friend
ago.
who's all into that. Like I have a friend
Yeah.
who's all into that. She's constantly pushing it. She's like, common law is the way out. And I'm like, wait, how's this going to work in a corrupt Freemasonic court system? I mean, the judges don't really care what law you use. They just want to annihilate you because the courts in Ireland are so corrupt that they only give pedophiles suspended sentences, but they lock people up who spread hate speech for 5 years. That's how corrupt it is.
Well, let's cut to what this is really about. The European races and the Irish, they want them out of the way. That's what it really is about. Yeah. Wherever there's been traditional resistance, they attack them first. So basically, it's done by infiltration. It's not done by fair means. It's done by foul means, and it's infiltrated the courts. These people are there now, and they're in the magistrates' courts. They're in the Crown courts. I've come up against it, and I was so shocked by what had happened. I couldn't even believe it, that the police would manufacture the crime, escalate the charges, and destroy all of the defense evidence. And I've seen it. So this is the thing about communitarian law. It means it's for the good of the community, not the individual. And the community is their system. So if you're against their system, you don't have rights. That's how it works. It's pretty shocking, but I know it to be true because of the research I've done. And basically, all this common law stuff, I tried it out. We made a film called Councils, Courts and Con Men about 12 years ago. We went into court, but put the birth certificate in the dock. Doesn't mean anything. Of course, you're a legal fiction, because otherwise you couldn't convey anything on paper. I mean, you can't post yourself through a letterbox, can you? So you have to create a legal fiction, right? So you have to put yourself on paper. I looked into the whole thing. There's an article at winnersontheworld.net called "Are You a Pauper?" about the birth certificate. It came from the certificate of settlement in the 1600s. And it meant you couldn't go from one neighborhood to another without the certificate of settlement. The certificate of settlement became the passport, the national insurance number, etc. But basically, if you look on your passport, it's I think in Ireland it's the same. It should say P, type of passport, P. That means pauper. Okay, so and the thing about the uppercase and all the rest of it, it is true, but it doesn't mean anything. And yes, I found myself to be traded on the international stock market. I was given a trader's input on a thing called Fidelity Investments. There was a bond in my name. But that's the GDP of the country. And so you get these people going, I'm going to get back my bond. Well, hang on a minute, but you said you're not a legal fiction. If you're not a legal fiction, then why are you trying to say that you've got a bond? Because the bond is a legal fiction. It doesn't exist. It's a future on the international stock market. It's not worth anything. It's perceived to be worth something because that's how the GDP of the country is worked out. So the whole thing is misinformation. And 10 years ago, a thing went round all the courts in the UK not to deal with this stuff at all. Because when we started doing it, with the council tax, they were so confused they didn't know what to do, and people thought they were winning, and of course they weren't.
Yes. So weren't you going to read out something? One of your articles. You're going to read it out on air.
Yeah, I don't think it put it all in that one. A mission statement. Yeah. Oh, it's not put the whole thing down. Hang on a minute. Let me just. Yes, it's not actually copied the whole thing. I'll try putting it in again, see what happens. I think it must be something to do with the amount of text you can put into a message. Maybe.
Is this from your maybe have a look.
Yeah.
In DLive it cuts off at we, but on Rumble it's able to go on until Democrats.
We deem this to be against the public interest and the front to democracy. I'll read it out anyway. Shall I read it out?
Aye.
Okay, great. Okay, this is a mission statement. And basically use it, but reword it for how you want to do it. We are an unaffiliated group of local residents concerned about the lack of democratic process in local government planning and policy. They can't argue with that. We will remain unaffiliated as individuals acting collectively and within the law towards a truly inclusive democratic process where all voices are heard. They can't argue with that. We are not affiliated with any group or organization whatsoever. Now, I'll just make a point here. The reason you say that is because what they will do is they will associate you with something negative, which has happened to me over the years. And I can talk about that later if you want. But basically, we tried to stop what was happening with the decommissioning of a town in North Wales, and we were viciously attacked. And they will make up anything about you. So it's very important that you say you're not affiliated. But also, this does not mean that we do or do not endorse other groups. So then they can't say that you're not inclusive, right? We do not agree with arriving at a consensus. This is important because what they do is based on what they call consensus. It means that everybody appears to have agreed. And they get this consensus through a process, which we can also talk about. We do not agree with arriving at a consensus through being steered into predetermined outcomes by trained facilitators, either working for the council or public-private partnerships. We deem this to be against the public interest and an affront to democracy. So what they're trying to say is that through consensus, there is a democratic process. It's an absolute lie. So basically, that short mission statement contains everything that you need to get in there, because what they do, these public meetings are held using something called Delphi technique, which the first time I saw it was at Occupy in London. And basically, that was when Soros got involved. They have facilitators and co-facilitators. They lead you through a series of very stacked and biased outcomes. So, for instance, if in your neighborhood, if they're trying to get rid of cars and close the roads down, they'll say, do you think there is too much pollution in your local area? Do you think there are too many cars on certain roads at certain times? Do you agree that we need to have more people walking and cycling? This is how they do it. This is how they gain what's called consensus. So when you see these forms or you go to these public consultations, they're not asking you honest questions. They're basically leaving out anything that opposes what they want to impose and what's already written.
Interesting.
Oh, there's loads of it. I mean, it's like you've taken the top of a can of worms off. You see, that's why. So I'm giving you as much information as I can in the shortest time.
Yeah. So about the mission statement. So do you read that out like in the courts or when?
No. You can put it at the end of your email interactions with the council, because basically when they come back on you at some point, you can say, well, you've read our mission statement. This is what we stand for. We stand for a truly democratic process, because what they're imposing is not democratic. But you have to prove that, and you can prove it very easily. And it's starting to come out now. But what they're trying to get people to do is to get all excited and storm the town halls, common law style, and put banners up. And there's loads of people in the UK who are steering people to do that. So what you will see, especially if you are having any success, you will be infiltrated, and you have to make sure that you keep it very tight, because it only takes one or two of these people to come in and they will destroy your project, and they will make you look ridiculous in the eyes of the public. And it's already happened. There's an article called, it was the last couple of shows I did actually. It's called, here we go. It's called Agents of Revolution. And if you read through that, it's got all the information linked into that. So All this stuff, you see, is like dynamite. But why is it that the so-called UK truth movement doesn't want to hear about it? Very strange, that, isn't it? Very strange. And now they've got this website called notourfuture.org. It's always a .org. And they're steering people. They've got all these people with a bit of a name who've been put into that. And they're all, if you read what it says, it basically, they are agreeing that the low traffic neighborhood's a good idea, but they need to be implemented in a more fair way. It's absolutely a template that has been put there to steer them into the intended outcome. It's energy harvesting, basically, you know?
Yep. Can I share the article you sent me, Agents of Revolution, and we could go
Please do.
through it?
Yeah.
So this is the video you did.
Yeah. That's you have to link a video in this section. So basically, yes, that's a chat all about it. Agents of Revolution. I can refer to that now. Yes, that was a long chat about Agents of Revolution. That lady on the right is Polish, and she was brought up in Poland during the communist era. And she says that basically what they're trying to impose is exactly what they did in Poland.
Interesting.
And she was part of the Solidarity movement in Poland. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd like to say is that the Soviet Union actually never collapsed. It was an illusion to give people false sense of security that communism failed when actually it didn't. And you know, we've always been living through communist era, and we're living in the most how would you say it, the most extreme dark time of it now.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes, it's absolutely true. I mean, if you look at what the Bolsheviks did in Russia, they're not going to kill 100 million people this time. They're going to get 100 million people to genocide themselves. That's basically what it is, or more than that. Obviously, they want the global billion. The global billion is what they talk about in their documents. It's actually in the Global Biodiversity Assessment of 1995 that the optimum population for the world is 1 billion. But in the meantime, 2 to 3 billion living at a frugal European standard, which means the poorest countries in Europe, will suffice. But because of COVID, they've accelerated it. But what I would say is that many of the people involved in this takeover that's going on all around you are absolute extreme Marxists. So they are the new Bolsheviks. So that is true. They are communists. The people like Susan Mishi of I know these people who are in part of this UK Health Security Agency. You'll find that communists have infiltrated everywhere. So I found this a long time ago, but they're also controlling both sides. So they're controlling the people who are saying that they're the alt-right. That's all controlled by them as well. So this is the problem, that people are basically, they're getting thrown from side to side and they're being made to join one camp or another. But all of that is in the system of moods, and that is described in the KGB handbook. You appear to give people something of what they want by telling them what they want to hear. And most people in the UK have never lived under a tyranny, so they can't see through it. And it's quite as simple as that, really.
Exactly. And when you look at Eastern Europe, like it wasn't that long ago it was under communism, but now it's seen the years of communism. The Eastern Europeans are very hard to infiltrate now because they're all they all understand how bad communism is, and
Yes.
they're well able to stand up for their countries. Whereas Western Europe wasn't really in the Soviet Union, so that's why we're living under communism now. But in the future, we'll probably go back to being a moral, decent, freedom-loving country.
Yes, but the thing is, you see, that many people have never lived under a tyranny. So they don't really know what it's like, just as you're saying. Whereas you are absolutely correct. I'm in Bulgaria at the moment, and they were under communism until 1988, since 1948, really. And the scars of the communism are still here, but people don't fall for things here. I think Bulgaria had the lowest vaccination rate in Europe. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's emigrated here, and she said that was probably the Brits who've moved here and watched the BBC, because I don't know anyone here who got vaccinated.
Yeah.
You see, so you're right about that. But I think that the problem, the main and only problem with people who live in say the United Kingdom and Ireland is that they've never seen this tyranny before, so they don't know what it looks like. But the people who've lived under communism can see it's a tyranny. You're living under it now, masquerading as community. Yeah.
And Romanians that are old enough to remember the Soviet Union, they said that the COVID lockdowns were like communism.
Yes.
And I think the COVID lockdowns were a practice run for the 15-minute cities, because you won't be allowed to leave your designated 15-minute zone. So when back to your article, Agents of a Revolution, we'll actually go through it.
Yeah.
Would you like to read it out? Or
yeah. This is a really important point, and I keep these articles dead simple, because a lot of this is mimetic warfare. So that means that they are attacking you with words, and they are restricting the language of engagement. And that is very important. The language of sustainable development restricts the argument. So this article starts off with, the revolutionary spirit is accounted for. The revolutionary spirit is harnessed and steered. And that's exactly what is going on in the UK at the moment. So basically, it says the radical revolutionary groups which control all opposition to globalism are run by the Revolution by Numbers School of Direct Action, organized and funded template protests. So this direct action is what the Marxists use. So what it means is engaging the public in, say, storming a town hall, putting up banners, all having the same thing on the banners. You're given your banners, you're given your sound bites, and you're told what to do. They're leading you into what they call the revolutionary spirit. So people are actually instigating a revolution against themselves. And that's the trick. So the Marxists and the people controlling this, which are all Marxists underneath it all, because this system is based on Marxism, really, they are steering you into a cul-de-sac. So in other words, they're making it look as though you oppose what's going on, but that's not going to work, because they're steering you away from the solution. And the solution is within their law system. That's why they're trying to go, oh, say you're not a legal fiction, and say you don't want any more politicians. No, you have to hold them strictly to account. What they use, and this came out in 2010, is Saul Alinsky rules. And there's a book called Rules for Radicals. If you've never heard of it, you can download it on windowsontheworld.net on the free books page. And Saul Alinsky was a radical revolutionary Marxist. And he started doing what they call empowerment of neighborhoods. So he was able to steer people through using very audacious methods. And what you have to realize is that the people who are steering you have absolutely no moral code whatsoever. So they will get you to engage in stuff which is going to go nowhere. If they think you are going somewhere, their next thing is the defamation will be happening. And I know loads of people this has happened to. It's happened to me. They will defame you. They will put your name into the public and say you're this, that, and the other. But you have to weather the storm. So basically, they say in the Saul Alinsky rules that you basically hold the enemy to their own set of rules. That's really important, because they have a set of rules. When they're operating outside it, you have to catch them out. And that is incredibly important. So this article it's quite comprehensive in that there's a lot linked to it. So yes, for instance, it says the globalist-backed anti-globalists, the people who are led into fake revolution, work for all the globalist goals, whether it is direct action pantomime of useful idiots gluing themselves to roads, throwing super paintings, or disrupting council public meetings. That's a big one. That's going to happen. If you're holding people to account in that room, say you've got 50 or 100 people in a room, what's going to happen is there are people dotted around that room to assist the facilitators of that meeting. So if they can see that several people in the room may be working against them, they shut it down. And those people are called dragons. And they are at the heart of all these protest groups. So, for instance, in Occupy St. Paul's 12 years ago, whenever it was, they had people called dragons, and they were sent in to shout people down or threaten them with violence. And it's on a sliding scale, basically. It can be attacking you for being aggressive on the lower scale. If you're enthusiastic, according to them, you're aggressive. Or it can be getting death threats through the post. It can be your relatives being contacted. These people are not working within the law. When you get to the higher levels of this stuff, we're talking about people being accused of very serious crimes when they're innocent. You're talking about people who've been driven to suicide. And I know this for a fact because I've investigated it all. And this does happen. So you're up against something that's not just a load of kind of happy clappy communists. You're up against real Bolsheviks. These people play very dirty. And you have to remember that before you get engaged in it. So they prevent all useful opposition. They are using the sound bites, slogans, and billboards given to them by those they appear to oppose. Infiltration is how they do this. So it's quite hard to deal with, but once you know the template, you can spot it a mile off. Because the good news is they use the same template all the time. The template never changes. And it doesn't matter whether it's on a global scale or a local scale. And that's really important. Yes, all moods are catered for. The system of controlled opposition is very thorough in selecting its chosen sound bites and allowed dissent. I've seen many of these protests. And once we got the big society coming in 2010 through David Cameron, it was announced that they would be using the Saul Alinsky rules. So once you know that, once you know the government was actually telling you that these people are allowed to use radical ways of gaining public consensus, and also they're allowing them to operate outside the law. He didn't say that, but they are. They're actually allowing them to operate outside the law. So direct action theatre, which is what it is, which is what you see. So it doesn't matter whether it's people gluing themselves to road, Extinction Rebellion, etc., pro-climate change, or the other side, which is we want to see an end to government. We don't want politicians, common law, the new age, etc. That's the other side. So what you have to do is go down the middle of it and go, I'm not getting involved in that. And basically, you have to realize that what they're presenting is two things which are the same. They are to steer you into an already intended outcome. So basically, direct action theatre includes hijacking public meetings and appealing to those in the room who oppose the impositions, such as your low traffic neighbourhoods. The effective way of dealing with this issue is then removed, and those implementing it without consultation have further excuses not to interact with the public. So basically, they're looking for any excuse to shut you down. Once you raise your voice, they will say, you're being aggressive and you're inciting hatred. They will pin loads of things on you. You have to be incredibly calm, which is difficult to do. But you have to realize that they're working to a very subversive template. And it's very underhand. Nothing of what they say on the surface is how it works. They'll all say, no, we want to hear everyone's voice. They don't. They're not interested because the outcome's already been predicted. So basically, you have to be careful. So it's in this article anyway. It has to be observed. Yes, basically, all this, what I've just said, is then reiterated in here in a few paragraphs. So when you see slogans like "We are the 99%," "Whose streets, our streets," "We demand a sustainable future," these are their slogans, their sound bites, which their agents come in and get you all to chant together. And yes, they are radical Marxists.
Yes, in Ireland, in Pacific and England, um, there always would be these protests like outside Dáil Éireann or marching through Dublin streets. But I went to ones in the north, and
Yes.
the ones in the north were not that great. All they did was like they had rave music for a starter.
Yeah.
So we would walk through Belfast Street with a truck in front of us,
Yeah.
playing like disco rave music,
Yeah.
which made us feel like us very unprofessional. And then we would go to um this park to do speeches. I mean, I spoke at a few protests there,
So you're
but
being steered already. You're being shut down. That's a very good tactic that they use. Very
yes,
effective. They'll drown your voices out with a load of nonsense. Then they'll steer you to a place where you can't really be heard, where you can be surrounded and infiltrated.
yes. And then, but what happened then at the end of the protests, people would get drunk. And I went to a protest too in Galway. I didn't speak at this one, but the atmosphere was very bad. And, people were just sitting around getting drunk, not much action at all. And the protest numbers were very small. I mean, that's what happens at protests in Ireland and
Yeah.
Pacific. People just sit around and, get drunk and talk all sorts of nonsense that's not really
Yeah.
relevant.
Well, I can tell you that that's what they did with Occupy. What happened was a load of undercover police dressed as sort of new age types came in, and I did a big investigation into this, and it wasn't actually difficult to see, by the way, but I investigated all of these organizations, and they were all led into radical Marxist and anarchist groups controlled by the police. So what the police will do, and this is another point, and this happened in the UK, they got this woman to basically lead people, and she led them into a big shopping centre called Westfield, which was the wrong thing to do because there was families and kids in there, and they basically were going in and upsetting them basically. So the security people, quite rightly, because it's private, chucked them out. But what she was trying to do was get there to be a confrontation that would get in the newspapers. Anti-vaxxers, frightened children on a Saturday afternoon, whatever. Yeah. So then what you get is your agent provocateurs. So this woman, I said to her, and I've said it on my show, I said, she's a police informer. What they will do is they will find somebody who's been in trouble with the police, and they may do a plea bargain with them. And this has been known about for years. It was even reported in The Guardian about 12 years ago, when The Guardian actually had some journalists, the UK Guardian. So basically, they use criminals to cause trouble. And those criminals are then released by they're basically, if they get arrested, they're released by the police. And I've got absolute prima facie evidence of that over the years. So if you're being led somewhere, it's them, it's not you. And that's the trick. And that's exactly right. They will get you into a hedonistic kind of thing. They will have people who are drunk there. Next thing is the so-called anarchists would turn up, and the police, the undercover police, will get people drunk so they kick off. And it only takes somebody, and I've seen this. There's a very famous now agent provocateur in the UK who actually was seen stealing. It was something that was in the newspapers. This place was evicted. It was a place that was set up. I don't want to go into the whole history of it because we haven't got time, but it was set up as a kind of foil by the police to occupy St. Paul's. The ringleader of that group smashed his can into a car and screaming all over the place, got himself onto the news, you see. So that's all it takes. It only takes a couple of actors to portray you as the bad people. So I would say that all of these things are infiltrated and they're all steered. Yeah, unless you organize it yourself, of
Exactly.
course. Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is too, they create protests in order to bring in more communistic laws
Of
as
course.
well.
Yeah.
They're called psyops.
Well, it's psychological operation is basically what the whole thing is, actually, because
Yeah.
the whole thing's it's all about
Energy
psychology.
harvesting.
Yes. Complete psychological, because what they're doing is when they're empowering these groups, it is all psychological warfare. All of it. That's how it works. And it's on a very banal level now. In Britain, it is anyway. It's on a really banal level. And the people who they're promoting are just idiots. They're going into town halls, making fools of themselves. But they are all radical Marxists, these people. Yeah.
Exactly. So is there anything else you'd like to talk about, or before we wrap it up? We've been on here now for nearly an hour. We've got really good information out. Is there anything else you'd like to throw in?
Well, there's a lot on the website. I've tried to give you a kind of a condensed thing here. And I think if people listen back to it, it should make a lot of sense. So there's not a lot I would add apart from what I've already said, because I would just encourage people, go on the website, windowsontheworld.net, listen to the shows. We do a news show every Sunday, 9:30 p.m. UK time, and I deal with this stuff. And you can find articles on that homepage which will help you to understand this. And if anybody has any questions or wants to get in touch, you can do that through the website. So I hope you found it interesting, hope you found it useful, and I'm 100% committed to actually getting stuff out there that actually works, the solutions. Otherwise, there's no point. So that's all I'd like to say, really. Yeah.
Yes. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad that the Wi-Fi did not go on me this time. Last time I did a stream and the webcam broke, the Wi-Fi stopped working, and we just had to end the stream. So I'm glad that that didn't happen this time.
All right, Joshua, thanks for having me on. And I
You're
hope
very
it was useful
welcome.
to the people out there.
Yes, and we